We are back, and it's always great to say hello to Mike Griffith, weekend before a big game. Mike, thank you. And I just wondered, considering how much flack you took from Missouri fans last week, if you had anything to say to the Tigers as they headed toward Athens.
Well, you know, that's known as the Show Me State, and the Missouri fans have shown me how much they care about Eli Drinkwitz and how much they respect and admire you, Paul. Because they're all in behind you and they're all in behind Coach Drink. He's assured himself of his first winning season in year 4. And they have, you laugh, but this has really paid off. This is an investment that's paid off. You know, as we sit here and wonder what's ahead for guys like Billy Napier, he's a really good guy. You know, Billy Napier's a really good guy. We wonder what's ahead for him, though. And people talk about buy it after year 2. Missouri's here to show you that, look, you know, maybe Eli Drinkwitz hasn't had a winning season his first 3 years, but here he is in year 4, 7-1 right now with a team that a lot of people believe is capable of not only competing with Georgia, but actually beating Georgia. When you go back and look at last year's game and you look at some of the metrics, I mean, you know, Brady Cook is kind of their version of Stetson Bennett. I was listening to Coach Drink earlier this week, or maybe it was last week. He did an interview with Andy Staples of On 3. And he talked about how the Missouri fans were booing Brady Cook before the Kansas State game. And he talked about how he made Brady Cook earn his job before the season. And he said that Brady Cook doesn't want to come off the field because he knows if this freshman quarterback comes in, Brady knows he may not get another chance. So, I mean, Coach Drink putting a lot on the line, and it just kind of reminded me of everything Stetson went through at Georgia and how he had to continue to prove himself. And I look at the passer ratings today, and I see Brady Cook with the exact same pass efficiency rating as Carson Beck. So, I mean, this Missouri team has a lot of heroes. Luther Burden, you know, maybe the best receiver in the league. This is a guy Georgia tried to get. They couldn't get him. Missouri out-recruited Georgia for Luther Burden. They have a guy that Georgia really wanted and couldn't get. They've got this walk-on running back, the Schrader guy, you know, harkens another Bennett story. Here's a guy that was a walk-on. And Drink says he didn't really even care about this guy. Some booster just came along and said, hey, take a look at this guy. And he did and said, oh, okay, we'll give him a chance. And this guy's worked
Hey, Griff,
this is
are you running for governor of Missouri? Or, I mean, I'll ask you about if you had anything to say to the Missouri fans. That's all.
Well, I'm telling them the story or retelling the story because, you know, of all the admiration I have for this Missouri team. And, you know, if they win this game, you're talking about a team
Griff, we can wait till
SEC.
after the game to start talking about what happens if they win, okay?
Well, yeah, but if they lose, we're not going to talk about them anymore.
Well, no, we're not.
Let's talk about it now.
We're not going to talk about them at all. So let's move on because I think we've exhausted that subject. You mentioned Billy Napier. I didn't quite understand what you were getting at there.
Well, I think it's great. You know, Florida's I think they've got a military appreciation thing going. It's pretty exciting this week. They're going to wear black uniforms, which I've heard some jokes about that, but listen, that's, you know, it's just something fans want. It's not like they're dressing for their own funerals. Listen, Arkansas has had a coordinator change here. And, you know, it had to be pretty bad for Sam Pittman to fire a guy in season. And so that tells me that there'll be a lift for the Hogs. I'm really looking forward to this Arkansas-Florida game, but I just start thinking, what happens if Sam Pittman and the Hogs beat the Florida Gators? Do the fans start getting on Billy Napier again? You know, I mean, they've done what they can they were a well-rested team. They've gotten that knocked out. You know, the travel schedules changed for road games. They figured that. I just wonder how many more tricks Billy Napier could have up his sleeve and what the rest of the season could be like when you look at their schedule if they don't beat Arkansas.
Yeah, that would put them after all the big wins they've had, that would put them in danger of not making a bowl, wouldn't it?
It potentially could, and that's obviously something that we're not accustomed to. You know, it's kind of interesting. This weekend to me is so fascinating because you've got, you know, the Florida game against Arkansas, like we pointed out, an early start to the day. I mean, both of these coaches desperately need this. I hope Arkansas realizes what a fantastic coach Sam Pittman is. This has been a tough year for the Hogs. And Billy Napier with that schedule ahead, I mean, at LSU, we just got done talking about, you know, Missouri and what a fantastic story the Tigers could potentially be if
go ahead and talk about them 10 more minutes, Griff. I mean, there may be some guy in Cape Girardeau that just walked in from work.
Did you know Brad Pitt went to journalism school there? I didn't know.
I had heard that.
I've gone. It's pretty fascinating, you know. So no, but seriously, you think about it. 10 out of the last 12 SEC championship games, right? There's either been LSU or Alabama from the West. or Georgia or Florida from the East. And you've got these teams trying to break through, Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin trying to, they still have mathematic chances in the West. And of course, Missouri was the team other than Georgia and Florida that made it through the East. The Tigers are trying to be this Cinderella story this year, but you've got some real powerhouse matchups here with Georgia and Missouri essentially playing maybe potentially a de facto
What about
East championship.
what about Bama and LSU?
What about Alabama and LSU, man? You can't. And Brian Kelly saying that he wants to play Alabama every year. And Nick Saban kind of danced around that on the conference call. He said, in a roundabout way, unless there's going to be 3 annual opponents, the answer is no. Alabama will probably play Auburn. But I like Brian Kelly's attitude. Like, look, we want to play these. That mentality means so much. I think Brian Kelly was such a – is there anybody asking whether Brian Kelly or Billy Napier was a better hire anymore, by the way? I don't think so. I think that's a great game. I like Alabama to win it, though. I like Nick Saban with that extra week to prepare. Just like Kirby Smart has now won 19 straight games when he's had an extra week to prepare. I think Nick Saban is pretty fantastic, and I think he'll be able to devise just enough defense to keep Jaden Daniels off balance. And I think Jalen Milroe realizes that his best way to success is to tuck and run when it's not there right away. I like Alabama to win that game. It's going to be a fantastic showdown. What a great doubleheader we're in for this Saturday afternoon.
We're 8 minutes in, and we haven't heard a Steve Spurrier reference yet. So let me get to my final 2 subjects. The 2 other big stories of the week were Dabo Swinney going off on a caller, and obviously the Jim Harbaugh situation.
Well, Steve Spurrier was actually the last coach who didn't coach at Missouri, Georgia, or Florida to represent the East in the SEC championship game. And as for Dabo, I don't have a problem with that. I like that the guy stood up for his program. I mean, I know who Dabo is. You know who he is. We both know him from his Alabama days. This is a very genuine and emotional guy. This is also why coaches typically don't take calls. If you wonder why Kirby Smart is a double-screened I wouldn't even call it it's a coach's show, but the questions are, whether he prefers, hamburgers or hot dogs, that kind of stuff. Because when you start getting fans involved, it gets very emotional, especially in the SEC. This is an emotional conference. And, I'm kind of surprised we're this far in. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised. We haven't talked about Georgia much, Paul. Georgia's doing some pretty historic things. Did you know that if they win this game, they will tie their school record for the most consecutive
Well, Griff,
games,
we could have talked about Georgia earlier had you not read the press clippings sent to you by the University of Missouri.
Well, I want everybody, because listen, I mean, this is a serious game.
Sure. By the way, Cheryl Crow also went there.
I was aware of that. And did you know that when Missouri came in the league, they said Georgia played old man football? Yeah. I went back. That was kind of fun. There's been so many fun storylines. Missouri's been such a great addition to the league. They're kind of the Rodney Dangerfield of the SEC.
Hey, Griff,
I just don't think Missouri
week,
gets enough
I hate to interrupt.
respect,
Any chance before, I don't know what your health is right now, so this may not jive, but is there any chance we could hook you up to a lie detector test before you start this interview?
I don't understand. I don't understand where the lie is. Tell me where it's not true. Missouri doesn't.
I didn't say there's. I just want to watch the meter as you go off on these tangents.
There is. If you go, people can rewind.
And finally, will you be in the Republican debate next week? Because you sound like you ought to be.
No, I get so excited and engrossed in SEC football because of all the passion of the rivalries. I mean, watching Lane, speaking of politics, watching Lane Kiffin, just carefully and verbally dissect Jimbo Fisher, like a frog in a science lab, talking about how they could become bowl eligible and how much talent Texas A&M has.
By the way, do you agree with me on that? I mean, to me, that is now the most intense feud, rivalry in the SEC. I mean, Lane doesn't even masquerade that he would spit on Jimbo if the guy was on fire, would he?
Yeah, well, they don't. The pregame talks haven't happened, and look, Jimbo's got a job to worry about. He can't allow himself to be distracted, and Lane can kind of pick on him. He's won the last 2 games against A&M. I think they rushed for almost like 400 yards. This is a really intriguing matchup in Vaught Hemingway Stadium, and I don't normally put all those words in one sentence, but Lane Kiffin has done a heck of a job there this year. I think he's won 19 out of his last 21 home games, and this would be a big one. I mean, I don't discount Ole Miss. Obviously, they're next up on the Georgia schedule. Nobody looking past that here, but this is a big game for A&M. A&M has a fantastic defense. They get to the quarterback. They've lost 8 straight road games now, Paul, at Texas A&M, and you just don't expect that from a coach like Jimbo Fisher that came in with all that pop and really hype. He just hasn't.
He still gets paid, doesn't he? If he loses a road game.
I think he gets paid the same, but I'll tell you what, I know those Aggie fans, congratulations to the Rangers. That'll, keep, make people happy for a day or two. But those Aggie fans are going to be hungry because here comes Texas in the league, and they've got nothing to show for their time in the SEC to this point. And meanwhile, Missouri at least has played in 2 SEC championship games. A&M hasn't even done that. So it's getting pretty desperate around there. Next year's an absolute hot seat year for Fisher. But I think if he goes to a bowl game, he'll be fine. And like Lane said, they are playing for bowl eligibility Saturday. And Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss are playing to stay in contention for an SEC championship.
You once worked in the state of Michigan. Your takeaway on what's going on in Ann Arbor?
Yeah, well, a couple things. One, there's a lateral universe of truth there when it comes to the University of Michigan and how it gets covered. And I can't get too deep into the blue wall right now, but those who know how that works there. Alternate reality, I suppose. I just listen, and two, this is not new to college football, Paul. You certainly I know stories. This is just the tip of the iceberg. I think locker rooms are bugged. I know practices have been taped. And think about this now with the portal and players that are transferring, how much information gets conveyed, and even when they're recruiting kids to transfer. Lane Kiffin talked about pre-portaling and players being tampered with. What if there's an unhappy kid at a university and another school offers him a lot of money to provide information? He doesn't have that NIL deal, and he wants that $250. This is the tip of the iceberg. I'm not saying it's right. I think they have to punish when you have something, this, to me, it's this obvious. You've got them caught on tape. You've got to make a statement that you don't condone this, even though we know it happens everywhere. You can't get caught, right? I mean, it's an unfair advantage. It's almost like if there was some basketball school where players weren't going to class and they were, oh, wait a minute, that happened at North Carolina. I forgot that was all okay. Or some coach got caught by the oh, wait, that's Kansas. So it does happen in all sports. But when it happens, they're under fire, and now they have to do something about it. And the Big Ten is under the gun. I'll tell you this. If it happened in the SEC, you wouldn't see Greg Sankey sitting on his hands.
Mike Griffith joining us from Athens. Mike, many thanks. And next week, we'll finish up with some of the accolades that you had for the University of Missouri. We'll take a short break. We're back after this.
Around here, Saturdays don't just